Shalom Uvracha, friends. It's such a privilege to be able to share a few words of Torah with you. B'siyata d'shmaya, to help us prepare for Pesach, especially in the light of the Torah of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, Zchus Yagen Aleinu. B'al Kol Yisrael, Amen. What a privilege to be among those that are engaged with this tzaddik's Torah and are trying to take it to heart in the deepest way. So there's a very, very deep lesson from Rabbi Nachman, which I'm sure this chevra is familiar with. Torah and Beis, the 52nd lesson in Likutei Moharan. It's very well known as being a lesson on Hisbodedus, where Rabbi Nachman outlines a very specific kind of Hisbodedus. The aspect of doing Hisbodedus at night, and in a place where people don't usually walk during the day, and on focusing on our own negative traits one after the other to try to nullify them. And that's ordinarily how the Torah is learned, as a lesson about Hisbodedus. But the first column in Torah and Beis is some of the deepest lines in Rabbi Nachman's writings, Bechlal, where Rabbi Nachman describes the distinction between Mechuyev HaMetzias and Efshari HaMetzias. Very briefly, this can take a couple of hours to do properly, but just very briefly, Mechuyev HaMetzias means necessary existence, means existence as it is, real existence. And of course, Rabbi Nachman attributes that based on the Rambam, actually, in Mar Nevuchim, interestingly enough, which has been written about that connection. Rabbi Nachman attributes that kind of existence to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's all there is, Ein Od Milvado. He is the necessary existence. He can't not exist, so to speak. He is existence. The Mekoyim Shel Olam, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Mechuyev HaMetzias. On the other side of the spectrum, we have Efshari HaMetzias, which is a kind of being within the realm of reality that doesn't really have any necessary element that is bringing it into existence in and of itself. It's not real reality when held up to the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's Efshari. It could be and it could not exist. It's arbitrary in a certain sense. And what do we have in the middle of those two things? In the middle of those two things is Am Yisrael. That Am Yisrael are rooted in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's ratzon, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desire. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's desire is part of Him. That means Hashem's ratzon is itself encapsulating Hashem's mechuyev hametzias, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's true necessary existence. His will is a part of that. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu wills something into being, then that thing, as part of Hashem's ratzon and an extension of it, will also share in the element of mechuyev hametzias. And that's mitzad Am Yisrael's neshama. From the side of our collective soul, we also share in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mechuyev hametzias because He wills us into being. Now, in order for Am Yisrael to exist, we need a world. And Am Yisrael were brought into being in order to go ahead and fulfill their potential specifically within a world. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs to also have created a world. But the world is secondary to Am Yisrael in and of themselves. Rabbi Nachman says an amazing thing. Inasmuch as Am Yisrael are being Am Yisrael, inasmuch as we are embodying that initial vision of HaKadosh Baruch Hu for Mamlechas Kohanim, V'Goy Kadosh, for this that HaKadosh Baruch Hu dreamed of a nation of priests and a kingdom of holy people, the more that Am Yisrael embody this element of the soul, which was rooted in Hashem's machshava, which is mechuyev hametzias, the more the world becomes included with us, and within that aspect of mechuyev hametzias, and we bring the world to life. Because the world's life is only rooted in true existence in as much as it's serving us. And in as much as we are being who we are supposed to be and using the world properly, the world becomes included within our sharing in Hashem's mechuyev hametzias, and 3 is included into 2, and 2 is included in the echad yachad and miyuchad, in the true one, and all of being is filled with the light of necessity. What's incredibly deep to understand, and is counterintuitive, is that the difference between mechuyev hametzias and efshari hametzias is the distinction between freedom and slavery. Which would you naturally attribute freedom to? We would seem to naturally attribute freedom to efshari hametzias. Because freedom seems to mean is efshar, meaning I have the yecholet, I have the ability to do what I want. Everything's efshar. Mechuyev sounds super intense, right? There are certain rules that I have to follow. It's mechuyev, chayav liyot. That's not freedom. I have to do something. That's not free. But the truth is that it's mamish flipped. It's mamish the opposite. The world of efshari hametzias isn't efshar in the sense of it being free, because it is founded on a free choice, a free will, a good will that leads to a choice born out of freedom. It's arbitrary. That's what it means, efshari. It means arbitrary. And arbitrary is not a result of freedom. It's not a result of my free choice. It's something that I just have to do, and so I do it. It's peripheral. That's the connotation of efshar and efshari in this context. But the parallel of that is mechuyev hametzias. Now, on the one hand, again, mechuyev seems to be, this is how things need to be. But when we understand mechuyev not as set in stone, but rather as rooted in the true existence that's born of a free choice, spontaneous choice, not arbitrary choice, spontaneous choice, then it's real. And in that sense, mechuyev means locked in. It means real. It means an extension of my true desire. Going back to what we were referring to before, in terms of who we attribute these terminologies to, mechuyev hametzias is Hashem, efshari hametzias is the world, there's nothing freer than HaKadosh Baruch Hu's choice. HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose Am Yisrael. And that's mechuyev hametzias. That's a real reality. And Am Yisrael thereby are an extension of that freedom. Hashem chose spontaneously, freely, creatively, chose to bring Am Yisrael into being. And the world in and of itself is efshari hametzias. It's locked into being. It doesn't have a choice what to be. There are rules of nature. Nature just seems to be a process where the creation of nature, because it's founded on Am Yisrael, is an event. And that's the distinction between mechuyev and efshari. Is arbitrary, which is efshari, is arbitrary, it's not free, it's locked in, it's a necessity. And spontaneity, which is mechuyev hametzias, arising from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's free choice to go ahead and create Am Yisrael, thereby needing a world, but the world is arbitrary, whereas Am Yisrael are spontaneous. And this, without getting to the depth of it, Rav Hutner speaks about in Pachad Yitzchak, this is the difference also between the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach and the Taryag mitzvahs in the Torah. The Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach weren't chosen by the nations of the world. It was just put upon them. Because the nations of the world are included within the regular framework of the natural world, which is efshari hametzias. It's not founded on choice. But the Torah given to Am Yisrael needs to be chosen. It needs to be nasa v'nishma. It needs to be us choosing it. Because it's noveya, because it flows from the place of mechuyev hametzias. It's kol kulo, filled with a creative power, with the power and the desire to recreate the world into a new world order, which is a malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Mar Eliv Kiva Moyed, like we say. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu should come because we're waiting. Higala no, Frois Chavivi Alai, Suka Shlemecha, Ta'ir Eretz Michvadecha. To recreate the world in a new way. That's what the Torah is. That's what the Taryag mitzvahs are. They need to be founded on choice because it's coming from creation. And these are the two ways we can choose to live in the world. There are those who are going to choose to live within the world as world. The concept of cosmos. Just the natural processes of the orders of nature. And many people who live in alignment with that kind of reality without seeing a bigger picture, without being creation-minded, but it's just, this is all it is, they think they're free. They're the least free they are because they themselves are part of a process that's arbitrary. It's incredible. They think they're free because they can do whatever they want. But all of their doing whatever they want is rooted itself in an arbitrary system of processes that are locked into being, that are the furthest thing from true creativity, from true freedom, from true spontaneity that emerges from the essence of who they are. On the other hand, we who live with creation, that the world begins with HaKadosh Baruch Hu willing it into being. We who align our lives with a Torah that was founded on choice, we're among those that are truly free. Al tikri charas alaluchas ela cheres alaluchas. Memela, we are going ahead and recreating the world. There's nothing more free than being bound to the Torah. It's counterintuitive. There's nothing freer. Ein ben chayrin, like a person that's sitting and learning, like a person that's bound to halacha. It seems to be limiting. It seems to be mechuyev hametzias, but that's founded on true creativity, true spontaneity within the law. And that's Rachmana Libabai, to be able to bring ourselves fully to it with our ratzon, with our choosing, with our desire. And this, friends, and this will come to the end, is mamish, the bond between Zecher L'maise Bereshis and Zecher L'yetzias Mitzrayim. Shabbos brings these two things together. Shabbos is a little taste of the new world order that you and I are engaged in trying to build and engaged in trying to bring into reality. And so Shabbos needs to be a Zeicher L'maise Bereshis, because Shabbos brings us back to that reality that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, and the world through Am Yisrael is an extension of Mechuyev HaMetzias that's founded on spontaneous free choice. And Shabbos is also going to be Zeicher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim, because the Yetzias Mitzrayim is the freedom, it's that sense of breaking out. And then we come to Har Sinai, and Har Sinai we become even more free, specifically when we enter into this bond and into this seeming necessity to be committed to something beyond our will, but it's our deepest will. And so Shabbos brings these two things together, and they're intimately bound together. Zeicher L'maise Bereshis and Zeicher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim. We should be zeicher to live lives in alignment with the Mechuyev HaMetzias, to live lives that are filled with true creativity, that are filled and incredibly permeated and subsumed within HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will and His choosing and His idealistic vision for a new world that's a world of Shabbos. We should be zeicher. Thank you so much for listening. I apologize for the length, and wishing everybody mamish the most beautiful, incredible Pesach filled with the light of true redemption.